Hey folks, in this video, we are going to present a new Collate feature, Metadata Actions. We understand that metadata management is hard. Teams, policies, and data itself are constantly evolving, forcing your governance teams to endlessly try to keep information updated. Automations are the only way to keep metadata consistent through time and to avoid repeating efforts. For our first example, we'll add both ownership and domains to our assets in bulk. Data not owned is worse than no data at all. Who will take care of data quality issues otherwise? Or who will ensure that data arrives at the right place and time? Who will enforce governance and security policies? We can apply this process to any table or any other asset we have in our platform by filtering by their service, database, schemas, or even the columns they contain. We could also use a similar approach to define the domain of assets in our platform, making it easier for our users to find the right piece of data. To get started, let's go on the Governance tab and click on the Automator. In here, we can click on Add Automation, and for any action, any process that we want to apply to our assets, we'll need to always follow the same steps. First of all, let's try to give a meaningful name. In this case, I want to add both domain and owner to my assets. To apply, we write GTM team. As you can see, when we select our assets, we can specify which are the target of our automations. Maybe we want to apply this rule to any asset that we have in the platform, or we want to select maybe some tables and some dashboards to get started with. As you can see, once we select the assets, we are starting to get hints that, okay, looks like for now, 86 different assets have been found. But I'm actually not willing to update the same domain and the same owner to all of the assets here. I actually want to drill this down a tiny bit. In this case, I might be able to specify, for example, the name of the service. And I can say that when my service is Redshift or my Looker or Superset, I want to apply my target action. What is super handy is that once we are applying these filters, as you can see, we can click on this little banner there, and we will be automatically redirected to the Explore page, where we can double check and validate that those are the actual assets that we are willing to update with these automations. So make sure that you are always checking that properly before going forward with your processes. Finally, in the Actions tab, we can specify any of these different actions that we can apply. In this case, I'm going to start first by adding an owner, and here I'm going to select the marketing team. As you can see, any of the different actions that we select will have different properties that we can tune. In this case, I can choose if I want to maintain the owner that these assets already have, or if I know that marketing is the right owner of all of them and I want to make sure that they become consistent through time, even if someone else is going in the platform and updating them. I can also apply more than one action at the same time. In this case, I'm also going to assign a domain and specify my GTM domain. And as before, I'm going to overwrite the metadata. Now I can click on Next and choose the scheduling of my action. As you can see, you have a bunch of options. Maybe this is just a one-time recipe that you want to execute. So you can choose the non-schedule and just leave that for your manual executions in the future as well if you need to. In this case, I'm going to keep it simple and just make sure that this process gets executed daily. We can click on Automate. The action is going to be deployed to your underlying orchestrator. We can click on Build the Automators, and because I just don't want to wait, I'm going to trigger this process right now. If we refresh the page, we're going to see that the process has been finally executed. We can also click here on the automator name, and we can review then the actual configuration, all of the definitions that we have put in place. I can double check again my data assets, my filters, and the actions that we have chosen. And most importantly, I can actually click again onto my Explore link and double check that these orders tables, these booleans, customers, and whatnot have been properly updated with the marketing owner and the GTM domain. I can also go into my dashboards part of the Explorer and see that the same has been applied both for Superset and Looker. Going back to my Automator page, I can click here on recent runs and validate all of the times that this process has actually been executed. And if we also click here on the level, we can double check that all of these records have been properly updated. Another possible use case here would be to update the properties in bulk of any table containing the customer ID column. We could associate the glossary term to add the relevant context into it. Or we just want to make sure that we are properly applying the PII tagging there. Or we just don't want to repeat ourselves and go for table after table after table, looking where this customer ID is being applied and just copy pasting the same description. What we want is to create a repeatable process that will take care of adding the relevant information to all the pieces that are actually talking about this. To get this going, let's head back to our Automator page and click here on Add Automation. We are going to say update customer ID to add tags, glossary terms, and descriptions. However, I don't want to tackle all of the customers' IDs in any of the tables in my platform. I just want to filter them down a bit. So I'll go back, select my tables, specify that my service is only going to be the Redshift one, and even trimming that down by selecting my DBT shuffle schema. At this stage, we already know that we can go and validate the tables that we would be actually targeting with this automation. Now, by going into the actions, I can click here on Add Tags, and this is going to allow me to do two things. First, to select my PII sensitive tags, and then to specify that I want to apply the customer ID glossary term. But in this case, notice how we are actually not targeting the table itself as we were doing before with the ownership and domains. We actually want to apply that only to the customer's ID column. So I can specify here, hey, apply this action to the children, but not to any children, to the customer ID columns. We can also set the metadata to be overwritten, and we also wanted to update the description, right? So we can say this comes from an automation. And I need to select again the children because I want this to be applied to my customer ID. And also let's overwrite it just in case. We can click on next and get this running daily. Since we don't want to wait, let's just trigger the process. And I actually have here saved our customers table, which belongs to the Redshift service and to the DBT shuffle schema. And as you can see, it has a completely naked customer ID column. It doesn't have any descriptions, tags, or glossary terms. Let's double check that the process right now it's running and it just finished. So we should be able to refresh our customers page and we'll see that this description comes from an automation, that the tag is properly sensitive, and that the customer ID glossary term has been applied. One of the main points that we want to solve with the metadata actions is to ensure that the information only needs to be defined once. In this case, we can ensure that there's a single source of truth of certain pieces of information, such as the description, the tags, and the glossary terms, and get them properly propagated through the lineage. In this case, we can see how in the right we have one table where we would expect that it properly inherits tags, terms, and descriptions from this table at the bottom from this orders column and this table at the top from the customers column. To showcase the lineage propagation, let's get back to our customers table. As you can see, this is the customer ID column that we have already updated before. So it has the description, tags, and glossary terms that we added in bulk with the previous automation. However, if we take a look at the lineage, we can see how these customer ID, first name and last name columns actually are being inherited from the raw customers table. If we take a look at the properties that we have here, all of these columns already come with their own description, tags, and glossary terms. Let's see how we can make this to be properly propagated into our customers table. If we go back into the automations page and add a new automation, we're going to call that one lineage propagation to keep a single source of truth. And we are going to attack the tables that we have on our Redshift service and from our dbt Jaffle schema. As always, we can double check the Explore page to validate the assets that are going to be tackled by the automation. Finally, the action configuration is going to be super simple because we just need to specify that we want this lineage propagation. And in this case, we want to showcase how the override metadata is going to work. If we click on Next and specify it to run daily, we can just go, automate it, and just trigger it manually since we don't want to wait. What we would expect to happen is that this information from the raw customers, these descriptions, tags, and glossary terms, actually are going to be applied to the customers table. So we would want all of the information that we have on the customer ID to be overwritten with the one from the raw customers and the first name and the last name to get the information that they are properly inheriting. If we refresh this page, we see that the action already finished. So let's get back to our customers table, refresh, and we see how the information got properly updated with the new descriptions in the three of the columns, the tag that has been removed from the customer ID, and the glossary term that has been swapped from the customer ID glossary term into the account number. As you can see, the lineage propagation is one of the most powerful ways to make the most of all the information that you have been adding in the lineage from the other workflows that we are providing here at Collate. For our last example, we'll take a look at how we can automatically identify PII information based on ML models. Let's take a look at the example that we have here, where one of the columns is actually this username, which we might already want to flag as PII, but the same thing would happen even with columns that have weird names, but their sample data actually represents, in this case, sensitive information such as user emails. Let's take a look on how we can automate this process and make sure that we are never missing PII tags. In order to showcase this process, let's jump into our sensitive customers table. As you can see, we have the username column as well as a weirdly named one. However, if we take a look at the sample data, we can easily see that those are email addresses, and we would expect this information to be flagged as PII. If we jump to our automator page, we can add a PII ML tagging one, and in the assets, again, select the tables. We'll filter by Redshift, and in this case, the database schema is going to be the test one, which is the one that contains the sensitive customers table. For the actions, we just need to specify that we want the ML tagging. Let's click on Next, make sure that this runs daily, automate, and let's trigger it now so that we don't need to wait. Now that the process finished, let's take a look at our table. If we go back to the schema and refresh the page, the username column has been properly flagged as sensitive, and not only that, but we have identified the type of data that's in there. The same thing happened with address, as well as with this weirdly named column, which we say that it's PII sensitive, as well as an email. As you can see, Metadata Actions democratize metadata management via no-code automations, empowering your business users and unblocking their schedules. It's super easy to follow all of these different use cases, defining rules that are going to be applied over and over again, keeping all of your metadata consistent. We hope that you're as excited as this feature as we are.